Picture this. It is the middle of June. The very first 95-degree day of the year just hit.
Oh, the worst time.
Right. The house feels super heavy. You are sweating.
Yeah.
But, you want to be a responsible homeowner.
Naturally.
Yeah. So you realize you haven't had your air conditioner looked at since last summer.
Which is a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you pick up the phone to book a routine AC tune-up.
Mm-hmm.
You are, fully ready to hand over your hard-earned money just to get that peace of mind.
Just tell me it works, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the technician on the other end of the line tells you no.
Wow.
Yeah, they flat out say they won't do it,
Yep.
and that you have to wait until October.
Which, as a consumer trying to proactively maintain a really vital system, that feels incredibly frustrating.
Right, absolutely.
You are actively trying to pay a business for a preventive service that they literally advertise, and they're just flat out refusing your money.
It makes no sense at first glance.
Yeah.
So, in today's deep dive, we are exploring the surprising and honestly fascinating physics of air conditioning maintenance. It really is fascinating.
We are going to look at why doing the quote-unquote right thing, like getting a tune-up at the wrong time, might actually cost you thousands of dollars in catastrophic equipment failure.
Yeah, it sounds completely counterintuitive that a business would reject revenue.
Yeah.
But this isn't about, a technician being difficult.
Right, or just being too busy.
Exactly. It's not about managing a busy summer schedule. It fundamentally comes down to the laws of thermodynamics and, the strict physical limits of how we actually measure them.
So, to guide us through the actual mechanics of this, we are pulling directly from the field notes and the manufacturer service literature of Dave Hartzell.
He's a veteran.
Totally. He is a master HVAC technician with 45 years in the trade. He operates Hartzell's Heat and Air right in Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
And if there is anyone who intimately understands extreme summer heat, it's him.
Yeah, how air conditioning systems react to that heat under extreme stress. It is someone who has spent 4.5 decades just pulling wrenches on them in the middle of the Oklahoma plains. His field notes are invaluable, honestly, because they bridge this massive gap between what those glossy marketing brochures tell you an AC tune-up is and, what the actual physics of the machinery demand.
It's totally different.
It really is. It
Yeah.
forces us to redefine the service entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can really understand why the summer heat fundamentally breaks the tune-up process, we need to understand what you're actually trying to buy for your $229.
Right, because most people have a very specific image in their head.
Yeah, I think a lot of people picture an AC tune-up as just a fancy, superficial cleaning. Like
Cool.
a technician comes out with a garden hose, washes some cottonwood fluff out of the outdoor condenser, swaps the pleated air filter inside, and then just hands you an invoice.
Yeah, that is the wash and wipe method. And unfortunately, it is incredibly common in the industry.
Just a quick in and out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a genuine tune-up, the kind that actually prevents your system from locking up on the absolutely hottest day of the year, that is a rigorous diagnostic of the entire system under load.
It's way more involved.
It is. According to Dave's records, a true baseline evaluation involves 18 specific written-down measurements. We are talking about checking things like superheat and subcooling on the refrigerant side.
And for anyone who might be slightly rusty on their refrigeration cycle, subcooling basically tells us if the liquid refrigerant has shed enough heat in the outdoor coil before it heads indoors.
Exactly. And then superheat.
Right. While superheat tells us if the gas returning to the compressor is carrying the right amount of heat away from the evaporator. You literally need both of those numbers to know if the system's lifeblood is balanced.
Perfectly stated. And alongside those thermodynamic readings, a technician is out there verifying the exact amperage draw on the compressor. And the fan motors.
Against the factory numbers, right?
Right, against their factory-rated values. They are measuring the microfarads on your run capacitors, too.
The capacitors, those are the little silver cylinders?
Yeah, they act like localized energy reservoirs. They shift the phase of the electrical current, which provides the necessary torque to keep your motors spinning smoothly.
So what happens if they start to go bad?
Well, if those microfarads drop below a specific threshold, that capacitor is degrading. It will eventually fail. And when it does, the motor it supports will pull excessive amps and just overheat.
Yikes. So a real diagnostic catches that degradation early before the motor fries.
Exactly. Dave's notes also really emphasize testing the contactor for pitting.
What is a contactor exactly?
The contactor is essentially a heavy-duty electromechanical switch outside. It slams shut to send high voltage to the compressor.
Okay, so it's turning the heavy stuff on.
Right. But every single time that switch snaps shut, a microscopic electrical arc vaporizes a tiny, tiny bit of the metal contacts.
Oh, well, every single time.
Every time. So thousands of cycles later, the surface is pitted and scarred, and that pitting creates electrical resistance.
And the resistance means heat.
Exactly. Resistance generates heat, and eventually those contacts can literally weld themselves shut.
Wait, weld themselves shut so the compressor just keeps running.
It just runs and runs until it destroys itself. What's fascinating here is the absolute distinction in the technician's objective when performing these 18 measurements compared to, say, a standard repair visit.
Because a repair is when things are actively broken.
Right. When you call for a repair, which the industry calls a service call, the objective is symptom resolution. The system is actively failing. Water is dripping through your drywall from a frozen coil, or the breaker keeps tripping.
Or just warm air is blowing out of the vents.
Yeah, exactly. You need an immediate, targeted fix to a blazing fire.
But a tune-up is strictly preventive. You aren't chasing a symptom. You are paying a professional to hunt for silent anomalies.
Anomalies that haven't caused a breakdown yet.
Right. You are looking for a capacitor that is maybe 10% weaker than its rating, or a refrigerant charge that is just a few ounces shy of optimal. You really have to establish highly accurate baseline measurements to compare how the machine is running today against the manufacturer's blueprint.
Which requires a completely stable environment.
Trying to tune a system during a heat wave? I mean, it's like trying to set a car's baseline engine idle speed while it's towing a trailer up a steep mountain.
That is a perfect analogy.
The machine is just working entirely too hard and fighting way too much environmental resistance to give you its resting vitals.
That is the exact thermodynamic dilemma right there. Companies like Trane, Climate Master, and Carrier, they engineer these highly complex heat transfer machines, and they provide technicians with strict charging charts.
The blueprints.
Right. These charts are the literal blueprints for how to measure the system's vital signs, but they are built on a very specific set of assumptions.
What kind of assumptions?
Well, they assume the outdoor ambient temperatures are sitting comfortably between 75 and 90 degrees, and that the indoor return air is a stable 75 to 80 degrees.
Wait, really? The literal instruction manuals for diagnosing the health of our AC units are only mathematically sound when the weather is moderate.
Exactly. Because when it is 95 or 100 degrees outside, the system enters a maximum capacity state.
It's panicking.
Basically, yeah. The ambient air is so hot that the system struggles to reject the heat it absorbed from your house. As a result, the heat gets trapped in the refrigerant, causing the pressure to expand massively inside the copper lines.
That sounds bad.
It is. The head pressure, which is the pressure of the hot refrigerant gas being compressed outside, it just runs sky high. The pressure is reacting to the extreme weather, not the actual volume of the refrigerant.
So if the gauges are effectively blind at 100 degrees, a technician relying on them isn't just wasting time. They are actively gathering bad data.
Very bad data.
Because, if it is 80 degrees outside, a technician like Dave can easily spot a 5% undercharge in your system, right? The gauges have plenty of headroom to show that subtle drop in pressure.
Right. But at 100 degrees, the internal pressure is universally bloated by the ambient heat. A 5% undercharge looks completely identical to a perfect charge because the gauges are just pinned at the top of the chart.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If the AC is working its absolute hardest in the heat, wouldn't that be the absolute best time to stress test it?
You would think so, right? But the tools literally lose their resolution, and the physical environment alters the airflow itself. In peak heat, your indoor blower motor is running continuously.
Pumping out the air.
Right, but hot air is physically less dense than cool air. When the air is less dense, there is less resistance against the blower wheel, so the motor spins slightly faster.
Oh, which totally throws off the static pressure readings in your ductwork.
Exactly. The metric just becomes a moving target. It makes it impossible to evaluate if the ductwork is properly sized or if the filter is too restrictive.
And we also have to factor in what the system is actually pulling out of the house. It isn't just lowering the temperature on the thermometer, which is sensible heat. It is also dealing with latent heat.
Which is the humidity.
Yes, the humidity.
And that latent load is a massive energy penalty. In a 100-degree summer, especially in a place like Oklahoma, the humidity is often suffocating.
Oh, it's basically soup.
Yeah, soup is right. It takes roughly 1,000 BTUs of cooling capacity to condense just 1 pound of water out of the air.
That is a ton of energy.
It really is. When your AC pulls that humid air across the cold indoor evaporator coil, it has to spend a huge percentage of its total energy capacity just wringing the water out of the air.
Before it can even effectively lower the sensible temperature.
Exactly. And you measure that efficiency through what's called the temperature split.
Which is the difference between the warm return air going into the system and the cold supply air coming out of the vents.
Right. In moderate 80-degree weather, a healthy system will consistently give you an 18 to 22-degree temperature split.
But in extreme heat and high humidity, that split physically compresses, doesn't it?
It does. The coil becomes so saturated with condensation that the latent load just dominates the system's capacity. Your split might drop to 14 or 15 degrees.
Wow, that's a big drop.
Yeah, so a system that is operating perfectly fine might look terribly marginal or even failing in July, simply because of the hot, humid, heavy air it is being forced to breathe.
So if a technician tries to take baseline measurements in July, they might actually recommend expensive repairs because they genuinely think the system is failing when it is actually just temporarily fighting the severe weather.
Yes. Or, in a much more dangerous scenario, they might look at those pin gauges, assume the system is perfectly healthy, and completely miss the fact that it is slowly dying.
Which brings us to the really scary part. Let's look at Dave's notes to see what happens when that bad data leads to action.
Yeah, the field notes document a prime example of this. Years ago, a customer heavily pressured Dave to perform a preventive tune-up in the middle of July.
Big mistake.
Huge. It was a 102-degree day. Dave explicitly warned them about the diagnostic limitations, but they insisted on the service, for their own peace of mind.
They just wanted to check the box.
Exactly. So he hooked up his manifold gauges, checked the electrical draws, and took the 18 measurements. Within the limited accuracy of those extreme environmental conditions, everything appeared acceptable.
So on paper, it looked fine.
Right. The head pressure was universally high, the system was cooling, and the math seemingly checked out.
But then, 3 weeks later, that exact same system suffered a catastrophic terminal failure. The compressor completely locked up.
Dead.
The homeowner paid $229 to be told their system was healthy, only to have the literal heart of the machine die less than a month later.
Because the refrigerant charge had actually been low the entire time.
But the gauges didn't show it.
Right, because in 102-degree heat, a system that is slightly low on refrigerant operates with such bloated internal pressure from the ambient air that it completely masks the volume deficit. The gauges simply could not resolve the missing refrigerant through the noise of the heat wave.
I always knew the compressor relied on return gas for cooling, but seeing it mapped out in Dave's notes, it's wild. A mere 5% drop in charge during a 102-degree day completely stripped the motor of its thermal protection.
It really puts the catastrophic risk into perspective.
It really does. The compressor is this massive, incredibly hot electric motor sitting out in the blazing sun, pumping high-pressure gas. The only thing keeping the internal windings of that motor from melting down is the steady flow of cold, low-pressure refrigerant gas returning from the indoor coil.
That return gas is the motor's vital coolant. Because the system was running undercharged, it was starved of that crucial cold return gas.
Oh man, so it's out there baking.
Baking. It was trying to do the hardest work of the year, fighting against 102-degree ambient head pressure while being completely deprived of its internal cooling mechanism.
So it just died.
The compressor simply cooked itself to death from the inside out. The internal heat broke down the oil, the insulation on the copper windings melted, and the motor just ground it out.
So what does this all mean? It means paying for a preventive tune-up in July didn't just buy that homeowner a false positive. It actively delayed the intervention that could have saved their system.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a devastating tragedy of good intentions.
They paid $229 for a false sense of security, and it cost them thousands of dollars in replacement equipment.
If that homeowner had simply waited, just a routine 20-minute diagnostic check in October when the ambient temperatures dropped back down to a moderate 75 degrees, that would have clearly and immediately revealed that 5% drop in the refrigerant pressure.
Right. Dave could have just topped off the charge for a fraction of the cost, identified the microscopic leak, and that compressor would still be running today.
Doing the responsible thing physically broke their machine because the timing dictated bad diagnostic math.
So, since we obviously want to avoid buying a false positive and accidentally cooking our own compressors, how should we actually schedule our maintenance?
You have to be strategic.
Yeah, especially for the listener who is looking at the calendar right now, realizing it's the middle of June, and knowing they completely missed the ideal window. What is the strategic homeowner playbook here?
The playbook requires you to intimately understand your local shoulder
Silver
seasons.
seasons.
Yeah. In a climate like central Oklahoma, where Dave operates, the true mathematically sound tune-up windows are mid-March through early May, and then again from mid-September through early November.
Okay, so those are roughly 7-week windows where the outdoor temperatures sit beautifully between 60 and 85 degrees.
Exactly. The indoor temperatures are stable. The machine can be operated and tested under a realistic load without being slammed by extreme environmental variables.
And the vital statistic Dave provides is that 70% of peak summer breakdowns, things like degrading capacitors, slow refrigerant leaks, pitted contactors, clogged condensate drains, 70% of those could be entirely caught and prevented if diagnosed in these specific shoulder season windows.
It is a massive reduction in operational risk.
But life gets in the way.
It always does.
It is human nature to ignore your air conditioner until the exact moment you're uncomfortable. So if it is June and you miss the spring window, what are the actual options? Looking at Dave's pricing breakdown, he offers a $99 option.
Right. The basic check.
Yeah, that is less than half the price of the $229 diagnostic tune-up.
Yeah.
It looks like this is the dispatch fee for visual triage.
Yeah.
Rather than hooking up the gauges and running the full 18-point math, right?
That is correct. If a homeowner is incredibly anxious and wants some level of professional eyes on the equipment, the technician will come out for 30 minutes.
And what do they actually do?
They will change the air filter. They will test the microfarads on the capacitor under load because electrical capacitance can still be evaluated relatively accurately in high heat.
Oh, that makes sense.
And they will visually inspect the outdoor condenser coil. If the coil is blanketed in cottonwood fluff and dirt, they will wash it so the system can at least breathe.
They will also verify the thermostat is communicating and check the drain line.
Yeah.
But they intentionally keep their manifold gauges in the truck.
Yes, that is key.
They flat out refuse to tap into the refrigerant lines because they know the pressure math is fundamentally broken by the 95-degree weather anyway.
It is a stopgap measure. It clears the obvious hurdles and provides a baseline level of safety until October rolls around and the real diagnostics can be performed.
It manages the immediate risk without introducing the danger of a false positive.
Yeah.
But, remembering these highly specific 7-week windows in March and September is a logistical burden for the average person.
Nobody puts that on their calendar.
Exactly. So to solve this, Dave's company utilizes a specific financial and operational model called the Dave's 360 Maintenance Plan.
Which is pretty clever.
I am usually highly skeptical of monthly or yearly maintenance subscriptions for home services. They often feel like padded recurring revenue. But doing the math on this specific approach, the logic is incredibly sound.
How so?
The plan costs $360 a year. What it includes is both the spring and fall tune-ups, scheduled precisely in their proper thermodynamic seasons. 2 individual tune-ups at the list price of $229 would normally cost $458.
Right.
So immediately, the plan is mathematically cheaper than buying the diagnostic service a la carte.
And beyond the baseline savings, it includes priority breakdown scheduling. If your system does suffer a catastrophic failure during a July heat wave, you bypass the 3-day waiting list and go to the very top of the dispatch board.
Which is huge when it's 105 degrees out.
Absolutely. But the most crucial psychological and operational benefit is that the homeowner is essentially paying the HVAC company to absorb the timing problem.
You don't have to set a calendar reminder for the first week of April. The company monitors the ambient temperatures, they call you when the weather is perfect, and they say, hey, the diagnostic window is open, we are deploying a technician.
They're actively managing the thermodynamics of the schedule for you. They are aligning their business model with the laws of physics, rather than fighting against them for a quick summer buck.
It completely automates the process of turning a reactive homeowner into a proactive one, all while strictly adhering to the engineering limits of the equipment.
It's a win-win.
We have covered some deeply technical ground today, so let's synthesize the core takeaways. We started with looking at a $229 tune-up requested in 95-degree weather, and the profound revelation from Dave Hartzell's 45 years of field notes is that a tune-up in those conditions isn't actually a tune-up.
No, it's not. It is a service call dressed up in a tune-up wrapper.
Because the extreme environment renders the diagnostics completely useless. The essential refrigerant measurements lose their accuracy as the gauge is pinned to the top. The airflow's static pressures drift due to the physical density changes in hot air.
And the critical early warning signs, especially a system operating slightly low on charge, they slip right through the cracks, totally hidden by the massive ambient head pressure.
So the next time the first brutal heat wave of the summer hits and you get the sudden sweaty urge to be a highly responsible homeowner, remember this deep dive.
Save your money.
Yeah. If a knowledgeable HVAC technician tells you no to a summer maintenance visit, they aren't brushing you off. They are actively protecting your wallet, and they're protecting your compressor from a catastrophic heat-induced meltdown. Wait for the shoulder seasons. Let the math work.
You know, this reliance on precise environmental windows raises an incredibly important question, though. One that the entire engineering sector needs to grapple with as we move into the future.
What's that?
Well, if manufacturer charging charts, the literal non-negotiable blueprints for keeping our HVAC systems alive, are strictly designed for an optimal window of 75 to 90 degrees, what happens as global temperatures continue to shift?
Wow. If the baseline changes, the blueprints are obsolete.
Precisely. If our summers stretch longer and hotter, and those 7-week shoulder seasons in places like Oklahoma begin to shrink down to 5 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks, will the HVAC industry have to fundamentally rewrite the physical laws of how we measure, manufacture, and maintain our cooling systems?
That is a massive problem to solve.
Because right now, the millions of machines currently cooling our homes are mathematically anchored to a climate that is rapidly changing.
The math only works if the weather cooperates. And if the weather permanently stops cooperating, the entire diagnostic playbook has to be thrown out and rewritten from scratch.
It really does.
So as you sit there in your living room on that first 95-degree day in June, holding your phone and feeling mildly rejected by your local AC company, just remember, sometimes the absolute smartest, most scientifically sound way to fix a problem is to step back, look at the thermometer, and actively decide to do absolutely nothing at all.